6:42 a.m., Atlantic Crown Flight 219 was preparing to push back. The first-class cabin was hushed, privileged, and cold. Daniel Cross, a single dad, sat in 2A radiating quiet discomfort. His son Evan pressed against the window. A flight attendant paused, frowning at their pristine passes. She whispered loud enough for others to hear, "Sir, I'm afraid there has been a mistake." Passengers glanced over, eyes sharp with judgment. Daniel calmly rose. A security officer appeared. Evan gripped his father's hand, trembling. Daniel was silently escorted out, the tense silence suffocating the air of luxury. Daniel offered no argument, requesting a few seconds to gather his son's small carry-on bag. He moved with practiced, efficient silence, complying without lingering, but his calm acceptance only seemed to fuel the judgment, confirming to the observing elite that he was utterly out of his depth. The very texture of the silence, a cold, heavy presence, was thick with condescension and implied scorn. It felt like a physical barrier pressing down on them. A nearby passenger, a woman in a perfectly tailored Italian business suit, leaned in and whispered loudly, her voice dripping with calculated superiority. "Must be an upgrade glitch. Everyone tries to sneak a peek at how the other half lives these days. Then they get caught. Really, how embarrassing for the child." Her comment was a social grenade, shattering Daniel and Evan's last remaining peace. Evan instantly buried his face, his cheeks flushed with a painful, deep, crimson hue of shame. He crumpled the thick, prestigious, first-class boarding stub in his pocket, crushing the smooth cardstock into a worthless ball. The shame wasn't loud or aggressive. It was subtle, gentle, and thus razor-sharp. It cut deep because it was public, and it was tied directly to his father's quiet dignity. Daniel felt a familiar, white-hot, protective anger rise, a raw, instant urge to defend his son against the sting of unearned cruelty. But he immediately quelled it. Years of training in high-stakes rules and crisis management ensured his external composure remained granite calm. An argument now would only elevate the cheap drama and amplify Evan's sadness. He whispered to his son, his voice low, stable, and anchoring. "Let's go, son. It's fine. Head up. We always walk with honor, regardless of the room." They began the long, silent walk down the center aisle, a shaming procession that felt interminable. Every eye in the elite cabin was fixed on their retreat. The wealthy and entitled watched with detached curiosity, their judging gazes feeling colder than the chilled cabin air. A first-class woman deliberately turned her head away, her move a clear declaration that their momentary presence was an unwelcome social stain that needed scrubbing. The security officer led them past the galley, through the bulkhead, and deep into the main compartment. The journey was a physical and symbolic descent to seat 27F, a narrow window seat buried deep in the heart of the bustling economy cabin. The contrast was stark. The cold, spacious white leather of 2A and the worn patterned blue fabric of 27RF highlighted the vast chasm between the classes. The privileged silence of the front gave way to the low-grade chaos of the back, the constant rustle and chatter of too many people in too little space. Evan sank into the narrow seat, disappearing into the cushion. He whispered, his voice barely audible, his eyes swimming with doubt. "Dad, did we do something wrong? Was the ticket not real? They looked at us like we were stealing." The residual hurt and uncertainty in his voice was the only thing that truly pained Daniel, shattering his composure more than any condescending glance. Daniel squeezed his son's hand, gripping it firmly. "No, son, we did nothing wrong. The ticket was absolutely real, and it was earned with honest, complex work. Some people just don't understand the true value of things. They only understand the cost, and they assume worth is only found in expensive seats. But worth is inside us, Evan." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, recalling the reason for the first-class ticket, a spontaneous decision made after receiving a substantial, unexpected consulting bonus. He had nearly rejected the luxury, almost choosing to save the money. But Evan had been buzzing with excitement about the idea of flying like a king. Daniel had desperately wanted to give his son one perfect, flawless memory of comfort after the accident that had tragically taken Emma, Evan's mother, and forced Daniel to abandon his high-demand, high-authority job. The first-class ticket was his last, silent attempt to acknowledge the man he used to be, the provider who could command the world's respect. Now that memory was tarnished. Daniel had chosen silence and compliance, refusing to engage in an argument that would only amplify Evan's sadness and anxiety. He settled into the cramped space, feeling the hard plastic armrest nudge his elbow aggressively. The aircraft door closed with a heavy final thud, sealing them inside the pressurized cabin of silent judgment. The ordeal was brief, brutal in its subtlety, but the pain of the public escort was a new, silent bruise on Evan's heart. A wound Daniel knew he had to heal immediately. He was already planning his move. As the plane began its rumbling taxi, building momentum toward the runway, a deep, unnerving quiet settled over Evan. His small form was rigid, his gaze fixed blankly on the receding runway lights. The corrosive shame had settled deep within him, a toxic residue from the encounter. He was internalizing the rejection. Daniel immediately took out his sturdy black noise-canceling headphones, placing them gently and deliberately over Evan's ears. He pressed play on his son's favorite audiobook. A fantasy tale of a humble hero who saves a kingdom with his wits, not his sword. He attempted to create a small, insulated bubble of normalcy and calm, reinforcing the values he hoped Evan would absorb. Inner strength, quiet resilience, and the power of a calm mind. Far ahead, the first-class cabin had returned to its privileged silence. The escort interruption was already forgotten, dismissed as a minor, slightly amusing incident. The air of entitlement had quickly reasserted itself. Daniel, however, was keenly aware of the curious, lingering glances from the surrounding economy passengers who had witnessed the walk of shame. Some looked sympathetic, others just curious. He ignored them all, his focus unwavering on his son, projecting an aura of complete, unshakable self-possession. The man across the aisle, who had scoffed and smirked earlier when they walked past, adjusted his own seat aggressively, bumping Daniel's elbow. He leaned across the narrow space and muttered, with a patronizing smirk, a final, unnecessary dig. "Well, look on the bright side. At least you're flying, buddy. Better than being left at the gate with a revoked ticket, right? A good life lesson for the boy, maybe. Stick to your own lane." Daniel finally offered a response, his voice so low, measured, and calm that the sarcasm evaporated on contact, leaving the man exposed and small. "The bright side," Daniel said, looking the man directly in the eye, holding his gaze with unsettling steadiness, "is that this seat gets me to the exact same destination as yours. It just teaches a different lesson along the way. Humility and perspective are often found where comfort is not. I learned that lesson a long time ago." The scoffing man was stunned by the profound simplicity and authority of the retort and retreated immediately into the glowing, two-dimensional sanctuary of his movie screen. Evan, finding a brief break from his audiobook, looked up at his father, his voice still laced with residual shame, but now colored by genuine curiosity. "Dad, have you ever sat in this seat before? It's, small. Did you travel in economy when you were a consultant?" Daniel smiled, a rare, genuine expression that instantly reached his eyes and softened the sharp angles of his face. "Not this exact seat, no. My job didn't require me to sit much at all, Evan. I was usually standing in front of 7 monitors, reading and integrating data feeds that had to be right down to the nanosecond, with billions of dollars and many lives resting on that data. I only flew in first class because it was a condition of my contract. They wanted me rested and focused." He paused, gathering his thoughts, measuring his words carefully. "But I've stood in much more dangerous places, son. Places where a wrong calculation meant a lot more than a slightly uncomfortable seat. That, Evan, is pressure. This is just an armrest." Evan nodded, accepting his father's unusual, reassuring gravity. He trusted his father completely, and the mystery of his past work, always alluded to but never fully explained, always fascinated him. He put his headphones back on, a small seed of pride beginning to sprout in his heart. As the jet sliced through the low, thick clouds, Daniel stared up at the small, dusty window pane. His mind drifted back to his past, a life of meticulous precision, high-stakes decisions, and absolute, unquestioned authority. He was the central figure in the command center during global system failures. He was a critical, foundational part of the machinery that kept this very plane safely in the air. This cramped seat was, quite literally, nothing compared to that relentless, 24-hour pressure. Meanwhile, back in the forward galley, the head purser, Sarah Jenkins, was conducting a mandatory pre-flight audit of the manifest. Her finger stopped on the passenger line item, Cross Daniel, Seat 2A. She saw the notation that triggered the escort, mismatch alert, boarding pass ID type. But beneath that, the system notes showed a special, high-level designation code, Cross Lifetime Honor. The actual physical boarding pass still clearly showed 2A. The removal was based only on the swift, uniformed, and tragically incorrect judgment of a junior flight attendant who prioritized the mismatch alert without checking the full, deeply significant code. Sarah's eyes widened as she ran a full passenger history and status override check. The result flashed across her screen in bold red text. D. Cross, former flight safety commander. 10 years of flawless, legendary service. He was the man who had personally developed the Cross Protocol, the foundational emergency communication and flight safety protocols every Atlantic Crown flight was currently trained on. The severity of the error struck her like a physical blow to the chest. The removal of this man, a legendary hero of the corporation, was not just a mistake. It was a deep public corporate slight against one of their own. She cross-referenced the passenger list again, noting the CEO's office added a special instruction. Permanent, complimentary, first-class status. Code Lifetime Honor. Treat with utmost respect. This perpetual tribute, this non-negotiable honor, made the public insult they had just delivered unforgivable, a catastrophic failure of corporate memory and respect. A cold professional dread settled upon her. She knew the captain needed to be informed immediately, urgently, before the full, terrible scope of the operational blunder became apparent to the entire hierarchy. The reputation of the entire crew was now tragically exposed and compromised. She took a deep, steadying breath, recognizing that a massive public correction was the only way to mitigate the catastrophe and restore a semblance of honor. She lifted the intercom phone, her hands shaking slightly, requesting a high-priority, immediate private call to the cockpit. The quiet of the night flight was about to be utterly broken. Sarah's call to the cockpit was rapid and urgently controlled, conveying the immediate, non-negotiable need for a public, corrective intervention. The gravity of the situation, a public shaming of a corporate legend, was clear. The Captain Thomas, who had personally been trained and certified by Daniel Cross years ago, listened in a stunned, growing silence. He knew exactly what he had to do, and that he had to do it immediately, publicly, and with an undeniable force of sincerity. The correction had to be as loud as the insult. After an agonizing minute, as the aircraft reached its final cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign was extinguished, the main cabin lights suddenly flickered back to full, startling brightness. A deliberate professional event to command instant universal attention. The crisp, authoritative ding-dong chime of the PA system echoed, silencing all conversation instantly. The low hum of the engines was all that remained. The captain's voice boomed over the speakers, carrying the unmistakable weight of command, cutting through the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We apologize for the unscheduled interruption. This is a matter of profound importance and an issue of honor to Atlantic Crown Airways. Please give us your complete attention. The entire aircraft fell completely silent, every passenger momentarily pausing their meals, their screens, and their thoughts. The captain continued, his tone shifting from routine command to something serious, deeply respectful, and almost solemn. On today's flight, we have a very special passenger aboard. A passenger whose quiet presence among us is a genuine, undeniable honor to this crew, to this airline, and to the entire concept of flight safety. His presence is a vital reminder of the professionalism and dedication that keeps every one of us safe at 30,000 feet. In first class, patrons exchanged self-satisfied, smug glances, assuming the announcement was obviously for one of them, perhaps a CEO or a celebrity. The woman in the business suit smoothed her dress and subtly adjusted her hair, preparing for recognition. Down in 27F, Daniel merely looked up, his expression neutral, his calm demeanor undisturbed. Evan instinctively leaned closer to his father, sensing the sudden, magnetic shift in the cabin's energy. The freeze moment. The captain's voice delivered the powerful name, clear and echoing with solemn, challenging weight. The name a code word for safety itself. Mr. Daniel Cross, former Atlantic Crown Flight Safety Commander and the architect of our flight integrity systems. Please acknowledge this message. Commander Cross, we know you are aboard. The effect was instantaneous and electrifying. Evan snapped his head around, staring up at his father, his look of confusion rapidly dawning into pure, overwhelming pride. The small ball of shame in his gut dissolved in a single, magnificent second. A palpable shockwave of disbelief and dawning horror ripped through the entire cabin. Murmurs erupted, turning into sharp, undeniable gasps. In first class, the wealthy woman who had scoffed gasped dramatically, clutching her pearl necklace as her face drained completely of color, realizing the magnitude of her public error. The commander? That commander? The man across the aisle in economy stammered, his plastic cup clattering loudly onto the tray table. The deep, unwarranted shame he had inflicted with his cheap sarcasm was slamming straight back at him with crushing moral force. The captain then added the critical context, linking Daniel's identity directly to the operational safety of the flight, cementing his value. This is the man who meticulously designed and developed our current no-compromise safety protocol, the system currently running on this very aircraft. He architected the precise, multi-layered emergency communication architecture we operate on today, the system that ensures we can handle the unexpected without catastrophic failure. He personally trained every senior member of this aircrew, including myself, and certified me as captain before he stepped down. Simply put, ladies and gentlemen, he is the reason you are all flying safely and comfortably today, relying on the robust, redundant systems he engineered and implemented over a decade of distinguished service. The revelation was profound and damning. The quiet, humble man they had just watched be publicly removed and shamed was not an interloper, but one of the organization's foundational heroes. Twist 1. The sacrifice. The captain, speaking with deep respect, then detailed Daniel's abrupt, dignified departure, revealing the personal cost of his quiet life. Commander Cross quietly stepped down from his high-demand position a few years ago, a role he loved and excelled at, to become the dedicated primary caregiver for his young son, Evan, following a devastating family accident that tragically claimed the life of his beloved wife. He chose fatherhood, stability, and quiet duty over flight command, a choice that demonstrated commitment and character far beyond any professional title, a choice that we, his colleagues, hold in the highest esteem and profoundest respect. The cabin was silent again, the collective shame of their judgment amplifying tenfold. People now looked at Daniel, not with curiosity or scorn, but with dawning respect and deep regret for their initial, shallow assessment. Twist 2. The ticket's true value. The captain delivered the final, crushing blow, addressing the initial error directly and correcting the narrative forever. The seat reserved for Commander Cross, Seat 2A, was not the result of any administrative error or upgrade glitch. It is a permanent, non-transferable, high-level corporate designation for life. A small gesture of perpetual appreciation from Atlantic Crown Airways for his decade of service, his sacrifice, and his enduring legacy. It was an honor anonymously arranged by the highest executives of the company to thank him for single-handedly saving countless lives. It is, without any doubt, the single most deserved seat on this entire plane. The junior flight attendant, standing horrified and ghost-pale in the galley, slowly backed away. Her face was a mask of professional ruin and personal guilt. She had not only insulted a company legend, but publicly humiliated him in front of his child for a mistake that was entirely her own failure of due diligence. The captain concluded, his voice tinged with sincere regret. Commander Cross, we are profoundly sorry for the grave error, the unforgivable lack of recognition, and any shame or insult you and your son have had to endure at the hands of this crew. We sincerely hope you will accept the heartfelt apology of this entire aircrew and all of Atlantic Crown Airways. The entire aircraft waited in stunned anticipation. Daniel finally stood up in the narrow confines of 27F in quiet, controlled dignity. He simply raised his hand, a small, calming gesture, a classic Daniel Cross signal, indicating that he acknowledged the message, that the matter was closed, and that he requested no further drama or action. The gesture was efficient, powerful, and utterly understated. The captain immediately followed the dramatic announcement, his voice now pleading slightly with genuine emotion. Commander Cross, we request that you and Evan allow the crew to immediately escort you back to your rightful first-class seats. We insist that the company makes this right. Please, the cabin is entirely yours. Every eye remained fixed on seat 27F. The shame of the first-class passengers was raw, replaced by a desperate, palpable need to witness the mistake being undone. The economy passengers watched with quiet, supportive anticipation, hoping Daniel would accept the public vindication. Daniel's first action was to look down at his son. Evan's small face, previously drawn with humiliation, was now alight with profound, unshakable pride. The earlier shame had completely evaporated, replaced by an unbreakable shield of respect and admiration for his father. Evan whispered, his small voice full of total, secure affirmation, "You can sit anywhere you want now, Dad. You're the boss. You saved them, and now they know it." Daniel gave his son a deep, knowing look, a shared moment of understanding that transcended any seating arrangement or corporate gesture. The most important lesson he had hoped to teach was already learned, not in luxury, but in the face of adversity. Then Daniel turned to face the approaching head purser, Sarah, and the junior flight attendant, who were both prepared for a blistering reprimand. Daniel spoke clearly, his voice steady, measured, and carrying just enough resonance to cut through the airplane's constant drone. His tone was firm but devoid of malice. "Thank you, but no. We are quite comfortable here now. Please tell the captain we accept his apology completely, and we are fine to remain exactly where we are. There is absolutely no need for further disruption." The entire aircraft fell silent once more. It was the quiet, undeniable power of a refusal. He didn't need their luxury or the first-class environment to validate him. He had already won the moral moment, securing his own and his son's dignity in the most humble of settings. Daniel then spoke the words that became the lesson of the entire flight, directed to the entire shared space of the cabin, bridging the gap between classes. Respect is not about the seat number or the thickness of the wallet or the tag on the luggage. We accepted the shame thinking it was a simple, administrative mistake. We will accept the comfort of this seat now, knowing the profound truth of our honor. The journey is the same, and the character learned in a cramped space is far more valuable than any luxury could give us. The first-class passenger, who had initially made the scoffing, condescending remark, immediately stood up, his face etched with genuine, visible regret. He spoke loudly across the bulkhead, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "Mr. Cross, I apologize sincerely. That was deeply inappropriate and based entirely on shallow, unforgivable prejudice. I owe you a sincere public apology for my behavior." The original junior flight attendant, tears welling in her eyes, walked the final, humbling steps to 27F. She did not speak, but bowed her head in deep, silent reverence and regret before slowly walking back to the galley. Daniel simply gave a small, dignified nod in acknowledgement, accepting both apologies without demanding public fanfare or dwelling on the past mistake. His calm silence confirmed his authority and his forgiveness simultaneously. The captain, clearly moved by the profound public display of humility from both Daniel and the passengers, delivered a short emotional thank you over the PA system. The tension finally broke. Passengers in first class stopped their self-important whispering, their luxury suddenly tainted by the knowledge of what they had so arrogantly assumed. Those in economy looked at Daniel with profound admiration. Evan leaned against his father and smiled, a genuine, unrestrained, and healing smile. The most valuable lesson had been taught by his father's conduct, securing a memory far more precious than a luxury seat could ever offer. The aircraft stabilized once more, gliding smoothly and quietly above the clouds toward the distant dawn. The atmosphere in the economy cabin was now light, warm, and deeply respectful, a true community brought together by a shared emotional experience. Evan, finally settling in, looked up at his father. He asked thoughtfully, his curiosity overriding his residual embarrassment. "Dad, are you sad we didn't go back to the big seats? Does it matter that we stayed here?" Daniel gently stroked his son's hair, the gesture full of love and contentment. "The only time I would be sad, son, is if I taught you to fear or crave other people's opinions. We chose where we sat, and we showed everyone on this plane that we don't need their permission or their money to feel important. We know who we are. That quiet sense of honor and certainty is a better, more lasting feeling than any luxury could give us. Never seek validation from a label." Evan nodded slowly, laying his head securely on his father's shoulder, understanding that true dignity is internal and earned, not purchased. Moments later, the purser, Sarah, appeared again. She carried a tray with 2 specialized, non-alcoholic sparkling cider drinks and 2 gourmet desserts, rich chocolate tarts, presented impeccably on actual porcelain plates, a gesture of quiet, non-disruptive reverence. She delivered them without a word, meeting Daniel's eyes only briefly with deep professional respect before retreating. Daniel offered a sincere, polite thank you to her back, which she acknowledged with a subtle nod. During the descent, several surrounding economy passengers made small, genuine gestures, a quiet nod, a brief, heartfelt, "Thank you for your service," whispered as they passed the aisle on their way to the lavatory. No one whispered any more about class or status. Everyone saw Daniel not as a man who failed to belong, but as a man who chose not to claim his privilege. When the plane finally touched down, the captain, Thomas, was waiting by the first-class door. He stepped aside, insisted Daniel and Evan exit first, and deliberately stopped the flow of traffic to create a clear, respected path. In front of every single departing passenger, the captain shook Daniel's hand firmly. "Commander, it was an honor to have you aboard, and a greater lesson for us all. Thank you for reminding us what a true leader looks like, in any seat." Evan looked up at his father, his eyes shining with undeniable pure pride. His father's quiet honor and the captain's deep respect were a far better view than any window on the plane. The final image. Daniel led his son off the plane, his back straight, his simple jacket a uniform of dignity, disappearing into the crowded terminal. A single dad who chose quiet integrity over loud privilege, forever changing the meaning of a seat number for everyone on Atlantic Crown Flight 219. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to TT Healing Tales.